Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Tonight is a fun night. It's Halloween. We're going to be doing something fun. We're going to be talking about playlists, probably one of my favorite ways to blend the classroom and really build some of those Portrait of a Nevada Learner skills that our students need to practice. So we are in, I believe, our fifth class for the Portrait of a Nevada Learner Pedagogy series. And tonight we're going to be talking about playlists. My name is Kim Loomis. I used to work for the school district here down in Clark County, Las Vegas, Nevada. Some of you may know my name and face. I've been around a good long time. I retired just prior to COVID, which was detrimental for Clark County, but fun for me because I didn't have to deal with all of the remote learning. But I got to tell you, my love is actually digital learning. I was a former administrator at the virtual school down here in Clark County. I actually help design online courses. So I wish that my expertise would have been available at that time, but I have 10 years in a high school mathematics classroom. I've written a book called Think Outside the Box, the CIA of Blended. And if you're with us at our last one, we talked a lot about that one third, one third, one third. And a little bit about me. I love soccer. So matter of fact, on my TV right now is a soccer game that I've been watching all day. So tonight's agenda, we're going to be talking about the Portrait of a Nevada Learner and how to balance the classroom. And when we take that balance, that one third, one third, one third that I was just talking about, how can we create that one third with some guided instruction via playlist? And then how can we use playlists to differentiate the learning? Because I've been reading a lot of your guys' assignments, and they're so fun to read. I love to hear about what's going on in your classroom and how your kids are really engaging with some of these skills that we're pulling out with the Portrait of a Nevada Learner. But y'all have very differentiated students, from kids that can read really high to kids who can read very low. And so we're going to talk about tonight how we can create playlists that'll actually help with that differentiation. And remember, there's always a Canvas course that goes with our webinars. Everybody is enrolled in the Canvas course. Everybody who signed up for these webinars gets enrolled into the Canvas course. Think of it as a magazine. You can flip through it if you'd like. And if you'd like to do the implementation, and we'll talk more about that towards the end, you can earn an additional 5 hours of professional learning credits. So I got a quick question for you. What is one thing that you think all Nevada learners should embrace? One thing. Just if you only had to pick one thing, like we had to pick one song, what's one thing that you think all Nevada learners should embrace? And go ahead and throw that up into chat. Critical thinking, that's a great one. Vocabulary, social skills, problem solving, definitely, Robert. I love it. Get some great ones going up here. Discourse, self-reflection, perseverance. I would agree 100% on that one. Growth mindset. Yeah, if we had one thing, it wouldn't be enough, right? Because look at all this stuff that's waterfalling in our chat. We have tons of really good stuff that's coming in on our chat. And that's really what the Portrait of Nevada Learner says. You know, moving away from, just like we see here, moving away from that traditional learning structure to creating new classroom instruction that really helps kids practice these things that we want from them. If we want grit, then we need to have them practice grit. If we want them to have a growth mindset, we need to help them practice growth mindset. If we want them to help with, reading and understanding, then we need to set up learning environments that help them with those types of things. And so when we think about the Portrait of a Nevada Learner, that's really what it's trying to say. It's trying to say, look, don't move away from standards. Don't move away from your math, your English, social studies, and reading. We need those standards. But what we also need is we need our students to be practicing some of the skills that they're going to need in life. And if you've been following what's been going on with artificial intelligence, life is changing for these kids and moving very, very quickly. Artificial intelligence came on board last Christmas, and look at where it's at now. It's totally crazy. So when you think about the Portrait of a Nevada Learner, it actually started prior to AI. And we started thinking about, what is it that our students need to learn? And what do they not learn, but really skills that they need to practice? And how can we pull those into our classrooms? And so it was about May of 2023 where they finalized that Portrait of a Nevada Learner. So what it does is it says, look, we've got academic skills that we want our kids to learn. We're not moving away from the academic skills, the math, science, social studies, electives, world languages, all of that is not going away. But what we need to do is rethink the way we teach in the classroom to be able to bring out skills and mindsets like the stuff you guys just put in the chat, with resilience and grit and time management and emotional intelligence and flexibility and leadership skills. But to be able to do that, we also have to be able to have that opportunity for them to practice it. So if we can get them to practice it using different instructional strategies other than just standing and delivering, then the students will have times to make those time to practice. Now, in our portrait of the Nevada learner, there are 4 areas, and they're kind of grouped around what a student might think. Students might think, how will I grow in my learning? Why should I build and sustain relationships? And how can I do that in my community? And how do I contribute and make impact? I can't imagine any human that doesn't want to make an impact or want to thrive. So those are the 4 things that come out of our Portrait of a Nevada Learner. And if you were with us last week, I was with Superintendent Ebert, who said that she absolutely loves our portrait. And in our portrait, it has 4 categories: empowering, connecting, impacting, and thriving. So when you think about empowering, connecting, impacting, and thriving, and they have some, reflections and curiosity and collaboration, a lot of the stuff that you guys brought up in chat, but how do we pull that out? How do we help students get there? So when we think about the Portrait of a Nevada Learner, I have one question for you, and I want us to think about this as we go into our breakout rooms today, is what excites you? We had those 4 categories: empowerment, connecting, impacting, and thriving. But what excites you about our Portrait of a Nevada Learner? Welcome back. Welcome back. Hopefully you guys had some really good conversations in your breakout rooms. I got to tell you, I am excited about the Portrait of a Nevada Learner. It really starts bringing in some of the things that I loved to do when I was in the classroom. I really love to just release to my students and give them opportunities to practice and own mathematics. I even use that term a lot when I was a mathematics teacher. I want you to own the mathematics. Why don't you give us the answers, Miss Loomis? Because I want you to own it. I want you to just live it and love it. And that's the key, I think, to the Portrait of a Nevada Learner, is actually giving our students this opportunities to not only live and love our subject area, but to live and love learning. And what that connecting and empowering and impacting and thriving really all comes back to, is helping, exactly, you got it, Lorraine, building confident learners, right? Helping them understand that, yes, they're going to fail in life and they have to overcome it, or yes, they have to take risks, but still keep trying. So this becomes really important, especially in this day and age where we can find so many things going on with artificial intelligence. We could Google things. There's so many ways that technology has changed the world, but we really need to help our students. I heard the other day, somebody made the comment that AI is not going to replace us. But guess what? Somebody using AI possibly will, because that's the new tool of this next decade. So when we think about our classroom, we think about curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And that's really, we want to think about it in the blending situation. So I always talk about the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 of curriculum, instruction, and assessment. They look a little bit different in a blended classroom, and we're going to talk about web's depth knowledge. And if you've been with me, I talk a lot about web's depth knowledge. If I use those low numbers like 1 and 2, like I will always say, digital content is great to do DOK level 1 and 2. Those basic concepts, those basic ideas, I can give that away to Khan, or I can give it away to a video, or I can make a video and have my kids look at it at a different time. I don't have to drill and kill them from a podium to do that. But what they need me for is to push them to those higher orders, to levels 3 and level 4, where they're strategically thinking and they're extending their thinking by analyzing and evaluating and creating and taking information that they have and applying it to new situations. So they're always going to need teachers to really push our kids. And when we push our kids, then that's when they start getting perseverance, grit, communication, collaboration, creative thinking, right? So that's what becomes really important as we move forward into creating playlists. When I think about blended, I don't think about just blended, but I think about blended personalized learning. So we're going to take the wisdom that you all have about your standards, about math, science, social studies, PE, English, social, CTE, marketing. I know, Nathan, you do marketing, right? All these things, your wisdom and what you know about your kids. When they walk in the room, you probably know who's on the football team, or who's dating who, or who's got a little brother that's a freshman, right? You have all this wisdom because you carry it in your heart and your relationships with your kids. And that is never, ever going to go away. But what we have in this world is this new adaptive technology. And like we talked about, it's changing drastically. But if we can match those two, take your wisdom and the adaptability of technology, we can create personalized learning spaces that are even differentiated for each individual student. So if I know I have a student in my classroom who loves soccer, like you heard me talk about a moment ago, I can go into Chat GPT and say, look, can you create me a story that's based on a boy that plays soccer, that has a little brother and a dog named Joey, with a Lexi level of 5? And guess what? Chat GPT can pull that out and we can personalize the learning. And guess what? Joey gets a story that's based on his desires and likes. So cool. I love technology and the way we're going. But when you think of that equation, because, like I said, I was a math teacher for 10 years, it had 3 icons, and those 3 icons are so important. The tech icon, where we can give some of our technology away, delivering content, DOK level 1 and 2, to Khan Academy, iReady, to ReadWorks, whatever. If we can give that away, then we can take ourselves off of the podium and we can do teaching by walking around. And tonight we're going to talk about playlists, where we're going to give away instruction, because we're going to put it in a playlist and we're going to give it to our students, and they're going to be in that 1/3 active engagement with us being able to do teaching by walking around. So that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 is just a good mindset that we want to keep in mind as we're building units of study and we're building lessons, not every day, but when you're thinking in the overall world of your classroom, 1/3 of the time you're going to want to be giving away instruction to digital content. 1/3 of the time you want to be giving away the learning where the students are engaged and active, peer-to-peer, higher order thinking, 1/3 of the time. And a playlist is a great way to do it. And that 1/3 of the time where you might have a Socratic seminar, or you might be doing some lecturing or small groups or whatever the case may be, where you're leading. But 2/3 of the time, you're being able to create relationships by teaching by walking around and getting to know not only your students as individuals, but also getting to know them as their data. What do they need to know and what do they need to get to next? So when we think of the CIA of blended, not only do I say curriculum and instruction and assessment, but we want to start thinking about digital curriculum. When can I give away some of the learning to digital curriculum? When can I create environments that are higher order, levels 3 and 4 on web step of knowledge, that are authentic assessments where kids are analyzing, creating, synthesizing, all of that stuff that you guys started with in today's one thing that we need to know in chat, right? And then 1/3 of the time using our hearts and our relationships with students so that we can guide the instruction. And like I said, playlist is a great way to do it. And if you've been with us, we've been talking about, station rotation, another way to guide instruction. So tonight, our focus, when we look at the triple Venn diagram for the CIA, digital curriculum, guided instruction, authentic assessment, we're really looking at that one circle on the far right. That is where we're going to be guiding instruction. But the funny thing about playlists is not only are we guiding instruction, but we get to guide instruction by teaching by walking around, because what we're going to do with a playlist is we're going to guide the instruction, but take ourselves off the stage at the same time. So tonight, I want us to really start thinking about, how can I create a playlist or a lesson that takes me off the stage? Well, we're going to talk about that. When you think about introducing new content, think about different ways that it can be done. And it could be DOK level 1 and 2, which we can give away to technology, which is really great by doing that with multimedia. It can even be higher order thinking type stuff, because we can actually have the kids read a couple articles and then actually do some higher order analyzing, synthesizing, creating something that they've mastered or they've learned. Or we can really have them listen to us. We could lecture. We could have a discussion, but think about, there's different ways of introducing new content. I can do it by a teacher, I can have the kids do some reading, or I can have technology, and the technology has a lot of drags and drops and videos, fun different ways of being able to do that. So as you're creating your playlist or thinking about how to create a playlist, think about, what new content do I want the kids to do? And how can I get them into that new content? What this is going to do is shift the way we practice. This whole series is called The Portrait of Nevada Learners Change in Pedagogy, because we're changing our pedagogy. We're moving away from that teacher-centered classroom, moving away from always doing lesson plans and being the only person who delivers content, assigning activities and assessing students. What we're going to do is we're going to give some of that away to our students. It's going to change our mindset, but it's also going to give our students that opportunity to practice those skills of grit, perseverance, risk, failing. And, I hate to say failing. What I love to say is your first attempt at learning. You just, that's your first attempt. Let's try it again, right? Because we want our students to be the center of the learning. We want them to have some choices in the activities and the way that they learn. Do they like to learn through video? Do they like to learn through reading? Do they like to learn through lecturing and listening to us? And you have all these students in your classroom. If you did the learner profile in Portrait of a Nevada Learner 001, we did the Portrait of a Nevada Learner, and we asked the kids what their learning styles were. So we want to give them choices, and the playlist is a great way to do that. We also want to partner with digital content so that we're not the only person delivering. So even with digital content, kids have a variety of ways of doing it. They can listen, they can read, they can watch. There's lots of different ways that they can get there. And we talked about how to personalize it, even using AI. And the key here is those bottom two bullets under student-centered. Those are the ones that are going to get us to where we want the kids to be practicing, taking responsibility for their own learning, practice taking responsibility to completing their work. Now, if we're teaching by walking around, we can actually help support them in their behavior and their changes in behaviors and having to do those things. But we also want them to practice that peer-to-peer and understanding that they are in a community, they are connected to other people, and they really need to know what other people think and how they think so that we can live in this community together. So think about how can you put peer and self-assessment inside of your playlist. So again, this is a shift from that traditional making a lesson plan and delivering it yourself. This is where you create a lesson plan, and we're going to call a lesson plan in a moment. You're going to hear me talk about how we can take that lesson plan and really flip it into a playlist that we give our students. So when we release to our students, I want you to not only think about the Portrait of a Nevada Learner, but think about the SEL skills that we're actually helping our students develop, right? We're helping them develop self-management. We're helping them develop how to make responsible decision-making skills. So if you look at CASEL and you think of all of the things that CASEL wants, if we're practicing these types of releases to our students with digital content and releases to our students in peer-to-peer small groups or even shoulder partners, or like tonight's playlist, they get the opportunity to practice these competencies and build them. And that's what the Portrait of Nevada Learner is about. What it does is it does change us, our role. It changes us more as what I'd like to call the lead learner in the classroom or a guide on the side. We get to do a lot of teaching by walking around. We are creating a path, and that's what the playlist is. It really is just a path. It's a journey. Even the lesson plans that were created last week, 2 years ago, whatever, those were just paths. They were learning paths on a road to learning math, science, social studies, marketing, PE, whatever you teach. They were paths to a destination. But guess what, guys? It's the student's journey. And if you've ever been on a trail with your young children or with cousins or even kids, when they're taking a path down a trail, the kids are all over the place. Some kids are looking at the blue sky. Some kids got down and they're looking at the bugs on the ground. Some kids are looking at the leaves and the different spider webs that they see in the bushes. Their eyes and their paths are in different places. So even though we've created a lesson plan, it's the journey of the learner, of the student, that really creates that learning process. So what we want to do is we want to build a path that helps that student stay focused onto the learning. We can pull small groups. We can work one-on-one when we're doing this. Even though I've given a playlist, and we're going to talk more about playlists in just a moment, even though I've given a playlist to a kid, that doesn't prohibit me from pulling 3 kids aside and saying, hey, let me get you started with this playlist. And start with a small group. Or, I have a student in the back who maybe doesn't read so well, and maybe I want to adjust. I want to work with that kid in a one-on-one. My playlist might have 5 items in it, but this kid, I know I can lucky if I can really get him to focus on these 2 things, they would learn. So that's how you think about those types of things. So let's take a moment out. I want to show a video that I love. It's talking about fun. Tonight's a great fun night. Awesome. So when you look at that, to me, it kind of reminds me of the classroom, right? Here's the escalator. It says, hey, we're all going to move this one way all together at the same time. And then you've got this choice over there. Once they put in the piano and made it fun, it looked totally different. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into breakout rooms. And as we think about the video that we just saw, I want you to think about how that video demonstrated choice and even self-paced, because that's what a playlist is going to do. It's going to help us not only bring fun into our classroom, but it's going to help us demonstrate choice and self-paced. So welcome back. Welcome back. Gosh, I wish I was a fly in the room 2 and room 3. Sounds like you guys might have been having some great conversations in there. I got to tell you, I really love that video because it's a precursor to me, reminds me that we put our kids on an escalator every day. We push them through periods, or we push them through, a work day of our own path. But if we could just make it fun, where they had some choices where they can go up and down and back, and, we're still going to get to the top of the stairs, but let's see if we can make it fun. And that's kind of what a playlist is all about, is trying to make things fun. So we're going to talk about releasing learners to playlists. But before we do that, what I'd like you to do is to go into chat, and I'd like you to tell me just a little bit of background check if you've done playlists before. 1 means I've created playlists. I use them in my classroom all the time. 2 means I know what a playlist is, but I haven't created any. 3 means, heck, I have no idea what Kim keeps talking about. She keeps talking about playlists, and I have no idea what it is. Great group here, a little mix of everything, a lot of 3s and 2s, a couple of 1s, but I love it. We've got a lot of 3s. That is awesome. So those of you that are sitting at 2s and 3s, hopefully you guys take advantage of the opportunity in the Canvas course to actually try a playlist in your classroom. So let's talk about what is a playlist, because it's not just music like we had talked at the beginning of the hour. Sometimes they call them even hyperdocs. I bet you if I use that word, I wonder if your numbers would change. So when we start thinking about making this shift, making this pedagogical shift from delivering lectures and delivering instruction to creating a document, creating an environment where kids are the ones that are constructing their own learning. Notice what happens moving from a teacher-centered environment where we're the leader, we're the authority, and our students are passive receivers of information, to a different classroom culture, one that is more collaborative, one that is more supportive, right? One that actually has us as a facilitator of learning, and where students are constructing their own knowledge. And what we want them to do is to pose questions. We don't want to be the person who's posing questions and looking for correct answers. What we want the kids to do is pose questions and then seeking solutions to those questions that they have. Moving from our teacher-centered environment to a more student-centered environment as we move with playlists. So we're going to take that traditional classroom of I do, we do, you do, and assess, where everything happens at the same time, like that escalator, right? You can't even walk backwards or forwards in that escalator because oftentimes there's people in front of you or behind you. You have to do exactly what's on that escalator. Wait till it gets to the top. But what we're going to do is we're going to move from where students read the same story and they have to answer the same questions, and we have a dedicated day that we're going to have a discussion on and a dedicated day that we're going to have a test on. We're going to change that passive learning where they're thinking they're reciprocals and we're supposed to fill them up. No, we're going to change this. And when you change your classroom this way, you're going to get a little bit of resistance because kids have learned how to play the passive recessive, just fill me up. And matter of fact, I remember when my kids used to come home and they would say, Mom, we didn't learn anything today because the teacher didn't do anything. And I knew it's because they did a playlist. I knew it was because the teacher released the learning to the students. It's not the teacher's role to fill them up. It's the student's role to practice these Portrait of a Nevada Learner skills. And so that's what we're going to do with a playlist. We're going to take the same thing that we normally do on our lessons. Right? On a typical lesson plan or a unit plan, you probably have some guided questions, you have some exercises that you want the kids to do, you have some videos or some lectures that you want them to see, you want them to practice some skills, you have some form of assessment that goes on with there. So what we're going to do is take those exact same elements, but instead of writing a lesson plan, we're going to write it in a playlist that we give away to our students. Now that looks a little bit different. And sometimes I'll be honest with you, I was in the classroom for 10 years and my lesson plans were a lot of bullet points. But we can't give bullet points to kids. They really need to have a little more guidance. And so that's where the playlist looks kind of like a lesson plan, but a lot more guidance because we're giving it away to our students. So it's the same essential elements that you would have in a lesson plan, but instead of you only looking at the lesson plan, you're giving it away to the students in a self-paced study or playlist. So what this does, and sometimes, we're called hyperdocs, and you probably have heard that word before, where the kids are linking out to different things. That's a playlist. What we're thinking is creating a roadmap. Remember, we started with, hey, it's a journey down, a trail, and we're going to lead the kids down the trail, but they're all going to be, looking at different things as they're coming down the trail. We don't want them all looking at the back of the head of the person in front of them, like on the escalator. We want them to have some fun while they're doing it. So what we're going to do is we're going to foster some independence, allow for some choice, and even differentiate as they're based on needs while students work at their own pace. Now, I'm a big fan of not only individually, but also somewhere in that playlist, like tonight, I had you guys go into breakout rooms and talk and communicate with your peers. I think a playlist has to have some component of collaboration and communication with peers. And that could be via the project, or that could be checking in with your peers and self-assessing with your peers, but you definitely want to have that peer engagement as well. And what the teacher will be doing is they'll be freed up. Remember, they're freed up 2/3 of the time. Now we're actually guiding the instruction. We have more than 2/3 of the time where I can assist struggling learners. I can pull them aside. I can actually conference with individual students when I know that there's a student that is doing really well, or a student that's doing really poorly. I can pull them aside and I can say, look, I want you to do this in the playlist, or I want you to really focus in on this in the playlist. But what we're doing is we're taking that responsibility of learning to the students. We're placing it in their hands by giving them basically our lesson plan, but written in a nice, pretty playlist. So you might have seen this. This is an image that comes from Catlin Tucker, big fan of blended learning. And she's got a playlist here that has different types of ways of accessing information. Remember a moment ago, we talked about, I can do it myself. I can do it through text. I can have the videos do it. There's lots of different ways that I can have information given to my students. And so that's what we have going on here. We want to introduce the purpose. We want to build in some choice. We want to mix in some online and offline duties as well. So there might be a place where you want them to be online looking at a video, but you might want them offline doing another activity in a journal. So think about, how can I flip the instruction from not only me doing it, but for the students to do it? And I do mean self-paced, but that doesn't mean any pace. It means by the end of this period, we're going to get through this playlist, or by the end of the week, we're going to get through this playlist. Don't think that this is a non-paced, but it is a minimum pace of saying, hey, at the end of the week, I need you to be here. So we're incorporating online reviews, maybe some games and quizzes. You might even put in a built-in checkpoint, like on this image that you're seeing here from Catlin Tucker, that yellow, and it has a nice big red stop. It says, you're going to do these 4 things. I need you to do these 4 things. And when you get done with those 4 things, I want you to come in and check in with me. And she calls that teacher time before they go to the next steps. So you could actually put in checkpoints into your playlist. There's lots of different ways, and you're going to see lots of examples of playlists in our Canvas course. So what we're doing is shifting our lesson planning, right? Our lesson planning, we're still planning our lesson, but the difference is it's not a lesson plan that I'm keeping for myself or for an administrator to walk into my room and look at to make sure that I'm on track, but I'm really creating that plan in a nice look and feel for students to engage with. So I'm shifting the responsibility onto the students. So changes the way I plan though. I have to have all materials ready for that lesson or that unit. If it's a full week, all ready from the start. So I've got that all laid out, right? I want to have it all laid out. So, and then not only that, I want to make sure that there's a minimum due date by the end of today or by the end of the week. This is where we need to be, or add in some checkpoints so that you can make sure that students are progressing. An easy way to do that is to create, quizzes on Google Forms or inside your Canvas classroom that says, once you get to step number 3, I want you to take this quiz in Canvas or on this Google Sheet, and you can link it right there into your playlist. So what does this do for you? Well, it increases your time with your students. And if you've been with me enough, you know that I truly believe the core business of schools is relationships and learning. And that is a hierarchy. Relationships have to come first. That means we have to have time to spend with our students so that we can go in and we can check for understanding. We can walk the room. We can target some learning goals. We can note when students are having struggles and we can refocus them and connect with students. If I see a kid we started a playlist on Monday and he's been absent on Monday and Tuesday, I may give him the same playlist, but I might say start on number 3 or the yellow here in this playlist, because I need him to focus in on learning the concepts. And my playlist had some fun stuff built into it. That stuff that really, is nice because it gets the kids bought in, but this kid's already 2 days late. He's been out. So I want him to really focus in on the learning. So that's how one way we can do some differentiating. So let's talk about making playlists. So when you go into the Canvas course, again, you're going to see tons of them, more than just the one that you saw here with Caitlin. Go to hyperdocs.co. There are tons of playlists there. And if you are a 3, and several of you mentioned being a 3 in our chat group, meaning that this is the first time you've ever seen a playlist, you might want to just start with just implementing somebody else's playlist. You can go right into here and you can search and you can say, hey, next week, we're going to be working on this topic, and see if there's a playlist in there that you can borrow and try in your classroom, or borrow and maybe, change it a little bit to work for your kids. Don't feel like as you go into this implementation stage inside of Canvas, you have to do it all. Just like we want the kids to build up their risk and build up their grit, I'm the same here, guys. You can go in there and you can find a lesson and you can try one of theirs if you don't want to try making one. Now, if you're a 2 or 1, you definitely probably want to try making one. Well, what does it look like to make one? Well, when you create playlists, start small. I would highly suggest start small. Guys, you've seen playlists. Those of you that have been with me, Learn, Grow, Show is a playlist. Is an absolute playlist. It's got 3 steps to it. Learn a little bit about playlists, grow a playlist in your classroom, and show and demonstrate that you've done it. We did it with learner profiles. We did it with digital content. We did it with station rotation. That was a playlist. So start small. Think about a specific standard or a single unit and break it down into a series of tasks. And think about the transitions that you have in your classroom and think, well, how can I bring in those transitions, from higher order to lower order, and think through your DOK knowledge on where you want to get. And from backwards design, if I want the kids to create some marketing concept, maybe an ad or something in my classroom that talks about how to use ratios and proportion in the grocery store, then I can build them slowly up to that. Now, it can be linear. It could be step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, much like our Learn, Grow, Show, or it could just be, I like to use colors on my playlist. I have a blue, green, yellow oftentimes. And I'm like, I don't even care where you start. If you start at the yellow, or if you start at the blue, or if you start at the green, but in the end of the hour, I want all 3 of them done. And that gives choice to the students. Now, what I might put in my playlist is I might find 3 videos that introduce the same concept. And I'll put all 3 of them in my playlist, but yet I will tell the student or the learner, pick one of these videos to watch, not all of them. And that's how I even feel about my Canvas classroom. I truly believe that if you're going through the Canvas classroom, you need to find what fits for you. And sometimes not all the videos fit for you, because you might be an elementary student or teacher or secondary teacher, and some of the stuff relates to different levels. And so you need to help students or learners figure out what works for them. And that's why it's important to think about how you can bring in different medias, right? Can I bring in text, video, podcasts, different ways that students learn? I'm a big fan of using icons, and you've probably seen this already in my Canvas course. When there's a video, there's always the same icon. And the reason I do that is to trigger something in your brain to help you identify when I need to watch a video, or a pencil when I need to do some journaling. Or if we're going to go into iReady, I'm going to use the iReady logo on my playlist. I want to use icons and symbols for visual references. And also, you want to make sure that it's not all online. Yes, the playlist oftentimes is delivered online because it's usually a Google form or something like that, but you want to have some offline activities as well. I'll give you an example. Somebody used a great multiplication one where the kids were rolling the dice and they had to multiply the 2 numbers. That would be a great activity in a playlist. So think about what's the big ideas that you want to have done by the end of your playlist. Now, at a secondary level, your playlist can be a full week of study, or it can be a single day, a 50-minute period. Elementary, same thing. Think about how you want that playlist to cover in time. So what's the big ideas and skills that you want? Don't jump to the learning task just yet. We have a bad habit of doing that. What I really want us to do is I want us to think about, how will I know at the end of this playlist, when I give this to my students, how will I know that they've learned what they've been asked to know? So what am I going to do? What kind of culminating assessment, or what type of formative assessments can I embed into this playlist that help me assess my students' learning, as well as for them to assess themselves, or potentially peer-to-peer assessment before I put the learning events together. So think about a playlist. Okay, let's say it only has 3 things or 4 things in it. It doesn't have to be big, or it can be really large. But think about the tasks that you can have students do. There's tons of different things that you can have kids do. You can have them do quizzes, skills practice, pairs practice. They can do offline small group lessons. They can do conferencing, self-evaluations. They can make a screencast. They can make products. You can ask them to play games. I love to have at the bottom of my playlist is something that says, okay, once you get done with this playlist, because some kids are faster than others, I might have what's a choice activity at the bottom. So I might have, because I taught math, I used to like to put Prodigy Math down there because kids love to do Prodigy Math. So I would say, okay, when you get done with the learning today in the playlist, you can go and do Prodigy Math. Now you're going to see inside of Canvas a lot of lessons that I've put together on the Learn, Grow, Show. It's usually a 3-step playlists at all different grade levels, where I've used video, or I've used, practice skills online, where I've actually asked kids to work together in that playlist. So you can still have those exact same tasks as you would have in your lesson plan, but we're going to give that lesson plan to our students. So this is kind of what it looks like. When you go to hyperdocs.co, you're going to see lots and lots of examples. And there's tons of examples in our Canvas course. And again, if you're a 2 or a 3, and if you want to try one of the playlists that are already pre-made, please do. Or if you want to start with one of those and modify it for you, please do, because this is our time to practice. But the key here is to make sure that when you design your list, you want to have consistent language. You want to make sure that you use icons, because that's the visual to help cue kids in. I need a pencil, or I need a pear, or I'm going to go to iReady. So those are those ways to really cue kids in. I like color, because if this was my playlist and this is an example and it's a template that's sitting on hyperdocs.co where they use Engage, Explore, they're all different colors. I have a kid that's been 2 days out.
I might start them in a different place than I would have another kid start. But the way you can do it is make a copy of somebody's template, and there's some in our Canvas course as well as on hyperdocs.co, or make a copy of somebody else's and personalize it for yourself and for your students, or start from scratch. What would that look like? Well, you can do it in Google Slides or Google Docs. If you're using Google Classroom, you could even make a playlist inside of Google Classroom. Or if you're in Canvas, you can actually make a playlist in Canvas. Really what they're doing is probably linking over to a Google Doc like you see over there on the left. Now, you guys, there are tons of examples inside the Canvas course. So think about how I can bring in a playlist into my classroom. Some of you that are sitting at ones and you've done this in the past and you've been making your own playlists, I want you to start thinking about how you can differentiate your playlist. And a way that you can differentiate your playlist is think about how can I have different ways that kids can access content. So I can give kids choice between audio, visual, or through me, lecture even. I can have a small group on my playlist. How can I differentiate the assignments? How can I differentiate the assessments? How can I differentiate the path, meaning giving the kids more choice in the path that they take in going into there? So again, chunking that lesson into bits and pieces and thinking about what are different ways that not every student has to go up the escalator. Students should be able to go up the piano and stop and start and come back and make some music and have fun, but we're all going to get to the top of the stairs. So when you make a differentiated playlist, start by making a single playlist for your entire class, one that would go for the average student, but there is no average student in our classroom. So I'm going to make a copy of that, and I can differentiate it to higher end. I can make one that's going to take my kids to a higher order thinking. Those kids that I know that need to be more challenged, I'm going to create a playlist. I'm going to use that base playlist, but I'm going to put some little more challenge in it. It might be in the assessment area. It might be in the content area. It might be in the different ways that they access the content. Or I also want to take that same average playlist and I might want to change it for my slower readers, for those kids that need a little more personal time. So I can change that and consider the Lexi levels, maybe limit the choices, maybe give more choices depending on if it's my higher order kids or my lower order kids. I can actually extend the learning opportunities. Now, this is where you have to be careful. Don't extend it so much that you're extending the time, because you need to be careful on how much time you think that the kids are going to get through the playlist. So if I have a slower learner, their playlist might look different than somebody who's a faster learner. That's why I like that Prodigy math at the bottom for the kids who get done early. You could add in supports, but again, remember, try to worry about making sure that they can get through it in an appropriate amount of time. So when you're differentiating, you can change the content, you can change the games, you can think about bringing in Flipgrid that allows student choice, bringing in Edpuzzle to help flip the instruction. Nearpod and Parent Deck actually have playlist self-paced options that you could create into. So think about different ways you can bring in formative assessments or even check-ins with the teacher where you can make sure that the students are getting through the 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 steps that you've created into your playlist. So again, I got a question for you guys. How many of you want to do this in your Canvas course? Of course, I know that y'all want to go in and see all those different types of playlists that we've seen in there, and there's lots of them for you to look at, but it's about us reflecting on the pedagogical changes. Instead of creating lesson plans for me, I'm creating playlists for my students. And so it looks a little bit different, and it helps us support those portrait of an adult learner skills that we have. So again, over in chat, how many of you want to try it? Even